Hey ladies, welcome back to my channel, Parenting with Purpose. I'm Christian, and thank you so much for joining me. I apologize for an overextended pause in uploading videos. Last year was my last year in graduate school, and so I wanted to just make some time to make sure that I end well, and I thank God that He allowed me to graduate and on time, so I'm grateful for that. But here I am, and I really wanted to just share something with you. There's been a lot of changes that's taken place in this past year. But I mentioned just a few seconds ago that I recently graduated, and it was in, I want to say, let me start off by saying this. Now that that chapter of my life is complete, I am now at home, and I'm still homeschooling my son, and it's different now because I'm literally watching how God is restoring time that was once sacrificed because my son couldn't get all of me, and because I was splitting my time between my son and school, and so it was just a lot that was going on. And so I'm watching how God is restoring that time between us both, and being able to just see him and his growth. He's grown mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically, and he's getting older. And so I'm grateful for it all. But I'm reflecting back, and it's so interesting because I remember the time that when I first found out I was pregnant, and I remember it so clearly. I was scared. And at the time I was still active duty. I was still active duty in the military, and I remember, in the military, on the ship, at the time, because I don't know what they do now, but at the time, anytime that you were pregnant, they would give you a checkout list, and it was always in this brown folder. And so everybody knew if you was walking around with a brown folder, basically put your business out. Everybody knew that you were pregnant. And so I remember I had to check out with my division officers, and my senior chief, he was in the office at the time along with the division officer. And my senior chief, I don't know if I had a look on my face or just what, but he just told me, he said, "You're going to be a great mom." And the tears just started rolling down my eyes because I was so scared. And I was just looking for some type of peace, some type of knowing that it was going to be okay. I was scared for a number of reasons. I was scared. I didn't know if I was going to be a good mom or not. I was scared that, I didn't know what the next steps were going to be, because I was so used to it just being me and having that independence, the freedom to go and do whatever I wanted to do. And it just kind of led into this false belief of thinking that, having kids, that it would stop me from really, I guess, pursuing my dreams and goals. And having that mentality, it caused me to go into this, it caused me to wrestle for quite some time. It caused me to wrestle for some years, if I'm being honest. And I wrestled for so long. And just last year, I felt like God was, starting to, he started whispering Los Angeles to me 2 years prior. And it wasn't until last year, because it would not leave, and it started getting, I started, sensing it was like it became a burden It wasn't stressful, but I can really tell that God was really trying to get something to me. So I said, okay, God, I've been seeking you and I've been trying to find out. I've been doing my best to, just ask you questions, look for you in, in other ways than what I'm used to. And I don't know. I just remember I said, I'm going to take this trip by faith and fly out to Los Angeles. And I had also seen signs of UCLA. And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm taking the trip to, and it was me and my son, and I took the trip we flew out to Los Angeles, and for, I want to say 3 days, and the first place that we went to, because I had been seeing it, and I'm thinking, okay, God is trying to say something about UCLA, so we take a tour at UCLA, and the first, matter of fact, let me backtrack. That morning, we got up. We stayed in a hotel. That morning, my son and I, we got up, and as we prepared to go, I remember seeing, as we were heading on, merging on a highway, it said San Diego. And so, and it gave the mileage, like how many miles it would be to get to San Diego. And I said, if we have time, during this weekend, then maybe I could take you down to San Diego where I served at. Me and your dad, we served in the military. And so fast forward, we're at UCLA and we're just taking a tour, and we finished the tour and I'm like, God, I don't see you. There have been no divine connections, no conversations that really, kind of highlighted, okay, this is, I can sense that God is doing something here. I haven't felt anything. I haven't sensed anything. And so we're driving back home, and driving back to the hotel. And so that night, I remember that night, I remember it was just on my mind, and I was just looking up different things, and God started speaking to me about San Diego. And I was like, God, I don't know. I was like, I don't really do road trips. Like, I'm a rider for a road trip, but don't expect me to drive long hours for a road trip. My godparents have a funny story about that, thinking that I was going to drive for some long hours, and it just did not happen that way. You might get a good 2 or 3 hours out of me, but other than that, don't ask me to drive. Okay? So I was nervous, and I was like, God, I don't drive that long behind the wheel. And he just kept pressing it on my heart. And so I decided to put in Google Maps and the address that my son's dad and I stayed at, our first apartment together. That exact apartment came up. And I was like, oh my God. The address was not saved in my phone. This has been years. My son is now 11 years old, and I left that apartment when I was 4 months pregnant. That exact address came up. I said, oh, so we doing this? And I said, and I was still iffy about it. So I went to bed. I was just doing some more research before the night ended. And I went to bed super late. It had to be after midnight. And around 3 a.m, God woke me up. And I said, Lord, I looked at the time. I said, Lord, it's 3 a.m. And so he said, you're going to San Diego. And I remember going back and forth with God. Like, that's normally not my character, to go back and forth with God. But for some reason it was, and God was not playing that morning. I said, clearly you are not calling me to go, you're not telling me to go to San Diego to that apartment. And I said, you know what, I'm tripping. Like, let me try to roll over and go back to sleep. And I could not go back to sleep. I was up. Mind you, I probably only had maybe like 3 hours of sleep. And God would not let me go back to sleep. I didn't feel an ounce of exhaustion, sleepiness, or anything in my body. And I said, okay, let me slow down a little bit. I said, let me spend some time with you first, right? I tried to open up my Bible and everything, and I spent time with God, and it was not the same. He was like, I need you to go. The time that I had set the alarm for to actually get up, by that time, my son and I, we had already taken our showers and eaten breakfast downstairs and headed out. So the alarm actually went off when we got in the car to actually take the trip. And so we're taking this drive, and it had to be a good 2.5 hours because traffic was so bad, especially driving out that early in the morning. You know, people getting ready to go to work and things like that. And so it's raining. It is starting to rain the closer we get to San Diego, and we finally pull up at the apartment. Y'all, it was, feelings had started rising up, and I knew something was getting ready to take place. Like, I can still feel it, like right now, just by talking about it, I can still feel it. And I had, I remember feeling knots in my stomach. I remember getting really nervous all of a sudden. Like the moment I parked the car and just seeing the apartment complex, seeing how it looked so desolate. Like it looked so empty. It looked so torn down. And it was an opportunity for my son to see where he was conceived. Everything came back to memory. The night that everything happened, all of the memories just came up just from standing in front of the apartment complex. So I went to see if the door was unlocked, which back in the day it stayed unlocked. This time it was locked. I said it must be under new management. So I went around the back because I still remembered how, the neighborhood, surprisingly, since it's been so long, and that door was locked. So I went back, we got back in the car, and I just sat there and I just started praying. And yeah, we sat there and I just started praying. I just remember the tears. I was not prepared for the amount of tears that came out. I only had one napkin, and that was from when we had stopped at Chick-fil-A. I only had one napkin left, and that napkin no longer looked like a napkin when I was done. It was all shriveled up. And so the tears were flowing. It was like tears that had been held up for years. Now, mind you, my son is 11. I took this trip last year. So by that time, he had just turned 11. I left the apartment when I was 4 months pregnant. So all of these years, all of these tears were just held up, and I was crying so hard. The tears just started coming out, and all of a sudden I just remember hearing myself saying, I forgive you. I had to forgive myself for the decisions that I made, for allowing things to happen the way they did. Not that I'm taking the full blame, but just for being willing to settle, being willing to partake in a life that I knew was not good for me. And it was just all these emotions that was coming up, the different prayers that was coming up, and it was all needed. And so all of a sudden I finished my prayer, and I seen this guy coming in. He's coming in from running, his morning run looks like, and he opened up the door, but the door didn't close all the way. So I told my son, I said, hey, let's hurry up and go. We got out the car and we went in. That was our way in. And the closer I got to the floor that we lived on, the closer that we got to the actual apartment, you had to be there, but it just felt heavy. It felt heavy, and it was like I was reliving the year that we stayed in that apartment. The years of all the pain, the years of all the tears, the heartbreak. And I just remember it was almost like God had elevated me to see from a higher view. And I got to see the old me. And so it was like this whole trip I had to, it was to take this trip by faith. It really served as a funeral to lay down the old me, the, shrinking back and being fearful and not standing tall and showing up to be who I know God has called me to be. It was all of these things. It was not accepting me for who God created me to be, not accepting the call that God has on my life, the healing. I had gone through courses and gone through therapy, but nothing really took root because I was still entangled from my past. And I remember getting lightheaded. Like, it was so heavy on me. And just getting off the elevator to get to to get on the floor and get closer to the door, the tears came out again. And this was so interesting because my son is now with me. I'm sorry. The very son that I walked out of that apartment pregnant with, that I was scared to be a mom to, the very son that I didn't accept because I was still holding on to all the hurt and how he came into this world. I wrestled all these years. It was in that moment that I realized I wrestled all those years prior because I wasn't accepting my son as the gift that God had given me. I only saw him from how he was conceived and what I had gone through before. And so I couldn't love him in the way that he deserves to be loved. I couldn't talk to him in a way that he needed to be talked to. I couldn't nurture him in the way that he needed to be nurtured. Because I was so broken and I was still entangled from my past. And I remember in that moment, where I turned around and I don't even know what my son was thinking at that time, like in that moment, but I remember turning around and I said, I accept you as my son. I love you. And I gave him a hug. And it was like at that very moment, I physically felt something break. And our relationship hadn't been the same since. It's like now God has given me, like God has opened up my eyes to see him for who he is, accept him for who he is, accept him for the gifts that God has given him, accept him for how unique he is. And then I have a deeper appreciation. The fact that God even trusted me, knowing that in the beginning I wasn't going to accept his gift as my son. Or accept my son as God's gift. even though he knew all of that was going to happen and he still entrusted me with my son, it just gives me a deeper appreciation for who God is and how loving he is. And so I know I took a while to come back on this channel, but there were some things moving, and I truly believe that they had to happen for us to be able to move forward in life. So it was a funeral for the old me. I had to lay the old me down, and I didn't know, I wasn't expecting a huge, in the time, I was still going through the flow. I didn't expect a huge difference or a drastic difference, but I knew something spiritual was going on, because as we drove back, I was just in tears. So for a good 3 hours heading back to the hotel, I was in tears. And I remember we hadn't eaten. Let me backtrack. I remember after we left that apartment, we stayed there for a good hour and a half, because I had to release everything that I had been holding in. And so afterward, I took my son around the base that his dad and I served on. I took him to the hospital that he was born, where I had him at. And yeah, I just took him around the area. And then it was funny, because when I first got out the military, I didn't want to come back to Texas, because it felt like I felt like a failure. Like, I can't keep up with living out here in California. And all these years I had spent, like, okay, I plan on going back to California eventually. Like, I'm going to get my money up and I'm going to go back to California, because I miss it. And I just remember all the memories that I had when I was independent. When I went back to San Diego, it was so desolate. It was so empty. It was so different. It did not look the same. And I was like, God, forgive me for holding on to something that I thought I wanted. I came back to Texas, and it has never been the same. We have moved from the old house into a new area. That's a testimony for a whole nother day, how God worked that thing out. And but my relationship with my son is good. It's peaceful. I appreciate him more now. I see him from a different lens. I appreciate who God has called me to be. I'm able to move forward. And that's something that I really like. When I first started this channel, I knew God was telling me to start the channel, but I didn't understand why. So I was just moving off of obedience. But the more I take steps into what he's telling me to do and just constantly seeking him, I'm now starting to get that there are so many, there are so many parents out there, because I know I'm not the only one. I went through it. And so I know there has to be other parents that's out there who are feeling, you get where I'm coming from. Maybe the relationship, or maybe the relationship that you were in, it broke you and you have never been the same. Maybe it's something that, maybe you were in an abusive relationship. Maybe you were in and abuse can happen in so many ways, whether it be physical, sexual, or verbal. There's different levels to abuse, but you were in a toxic relationship and you have never been the same, and you still feel entangled. You still feel like you can't go forward. And that's who I'm here for. I'm a single mom, and I know God has been keeping us. I know for a fact God has been keeping us. And I'm so grateful, but that's who I'm here for. I want to help you to get on. I want to help you. I'm here to meet you where you are in your healing journey. Like, I'm here to help walk with you on your healing journey, meet you where you are, and help you, share with you what God has done for me, share with you what God has taught me, so that you too can be free from being entangled from the years prior to today. And so that's what I'm here for. And so that's why I came. You have no idea what the fight has been like to do this video. And it is clearly 7:12 at night. I don't have any makeup on, nothing, but it just came over me and I knew I have to get this video out. So forgive me for not being made up or anything, but I know I had to come and share that with you. But this is where we are and we're moving forward. I would love to hear your feedback, and we'll be moving forward from here. So I hope you got something from this video. If you know someone who can, who has been in my shoes, of what I've just walked through, send them this video if you know that it'll help them. And I will see you all in the next video.